the knight who became the goddess of love. In the heart of medieval Europe, where honor and glory ruled, one knight dared to break every rule of chivalry. His name was Ulrich von Liechtenstein, a noble warrior who believed that love was worth bleeding for. But Ulrich didn't just fight for love, he lived it. In the year 1227, he did something no knight had ever done before. He dressed himself as the goddess Venus, complete with a golden gown and a crown, and set off across Europe with a group of loyal followers. Everywhere he went, he challenged other knights to fight in the name of beauty and devotion. Imagine it, a knight in armor, disguised as a goddess, riding into battle for love. Those who lost would have their lances broken in his honor as a sign of defeat before Venus herself. Yet beneath the shining armor and poetry, Ulrich's devotion hid a painful secret. To prove his love to a noble lady who never returned his feelings, he cut his own lip and offered his blood as a symbol of sacrifice. Historical records from his own autobiography, the Frauendienst, confirm this disturbing act of devotion. The lady he loved had complained that his hair lip was unattractive, so Ulrich had a surgeon remove part of his upper lip without any anesthesia, enduring excruciating pain for a woman who would never be his. The surgery took place in the dead of winter, in a cold castle chamber. Medieval surgical techniques were primitive at best, and the procedure involved cutting away flesh with a sharp blade while Ulrich remained fully conscious. He gripped the arms of a wooden chair as the surgeon worked, biting down on a leather strap to muffle his screams. The wound took weeks to heal, leaving him feverish and bedridden. During his recovery, he composed love poems to his lady, describing his suffering as a worthy price for her potential affection. When he finally healed and presented himself to her, expecting gratitude or at least sympathy, she barely acknowledged his sacrifice. Court records from the period suggest she found his devotion disturbing rather than romantic. Some historical accounts indicate she actively avoided him at social gatherings, which only intensified his obsession. This wasn't his only extreme act. During his Venus journey, documented in medieval chronicles, Ulrich broke an astonishing 307 lances in jousting tournaments across Italy and Austria. He kept meticulous records of every battle, every victory, every moment of his theatrical crusade for love. Knights from Venice to Vienna faced him, many not even realizing they were fighting a man dressed as a goddess until after the joust. The logistics of the Venus tour were staggering. Ulrich traveled with an entourage of approximately 30 people, including squires, musicians, poets, heralds, servants, and armor-bearers. They moved from city to city with wagons full of equipment, costumes, spare lances, and provisions. Each tournament required advance planning, with heralds sent ahead to announce the arrival of Venus and issue challenges to local knights. Historical documents reveal the detailed preparations. Ulrich commissioned a special suit of armor that could be worn over his Venus costume. Key armor had to be functional enough for real combat while accommodating the voluminous gown underneath. Master armorers worked for months creating this unique piece, which had to balance protection with the theatrical requirements of his performance. The Venus tour lasted for months, and Ulrich's entourage included musicians, poets, and heralds who announced his arrival in each city. He distributed rings to ladies who watched his performances, turning each tournament into a spectacle that blurred the line between warfare and theater. Medieval society had never seen anything like it. Some nobles were scandalized, others were captivated, but everyone talked about the knight who became Venus. In Venice, the tournament became so popular that the city council had to intervene to control the crowds. Thousands of spectators gathered to witness the strange knight dressed as the goddess of love. Venetian merchants saw an opportunity and began selling Venus-themed souvenirs, ribbons, and tokens. The economic impact was significant enough that it appears in Venetian trade records from that year. The route took Ulrich through some of the most important cities of medieval Europe. He jousted in Treviso, where he faced the champion of the local duke, and won decisively. In Padua, he broke 14 lances in a single day against various challengers. In Vicenza, a famous knight named Conrad von Winterstetten, who would later become a renowned poet himself, faced Ulrich and was so impressed by the spectacle that he joined the entourage for several weeks. Historical documents reveal even more fascinating details about Ulrich's life. He was born around 1200 into a wealthy noble family in Styria, present-day Austria. His father was a ministerialist serving the Duke of Austria, and young Ulrich was trained in knightly arts from childhood. He learned to ride, fight with sword and lance, compose poetry, play musical instruments, and navigate the complex world of courtly politics. He served as a ministerialis, a type of unfree knight bound to serve the Duke of Austria, yet he possessed significant wealth and land. His estates generated substantial income from agriculture, mining, and tolls collected from travelers passing through his territories. Financial records show he owned multiple castles, dozens of villages, and had hundreds of people working his lands. His real-life adventures went far beyond the Venus episode. He participated in actual crusades, fighting in the Fifth Crusade in Egypt between 1217 and 1221. He witnessed the failed siege of Damietta and the devastating retreat through the Nile Delta. These experiences shaped his understanding of mortality and perhaps contributed to his later theatrical approach to chivalry, seeing life as a performance where death could come at any moment. He also fought in political conflicts closer to home. During the turbulent 1230s, when the Holy Roman Empire was torn by civil war between Emperor Frederick II and various German princes, Ulrich served his duke in several military campaigns. He participated in the siege of Wiener Neustadt in 1236 and fought in skirmishes along the Hungarian border. But it was his obsession with courtly love that defined him. The concept of courtly love, where knights worshipped noble ladies from afar, was popular in medieval literature, but Ulrich took it to extremes that shocked even his contemporaries. After the lip surgery failed to win his lady's affection, he continued pursuing her for years, writing elaborate poems and performing increasingly dangerous feats in tournaments. The lady in question, whose real identity Ulrich concealed in his writings by calling her simply "my lady," was likely a member of the powerful Babenberg family that ruled Austria. Some historians believe she was a close relative of Duke Leopold VI, making her far above Ulrich's social station despite his wealth. This would explain why his advances were not only rejected but considered inappropriate. One particularly documented incident occurred when Ulrich, still desperate for his lady's attention, disguised himself as a leper and spent weeks begging outside her castle, hoping she would show him mercy. He wore tattered rags, covered his face, and mimicked the symptoms of leprosy so convincingly that even his own servants didn't recognize him. He endured rain, cold, and the revulsion of passers-by who threw stones at him, believing him to be truly afflicted with the dreaded disease. She never did show mercy. When she finally discovered his identity through one of her maids who recognized his voice, instead of being moved, she reportedly laughed at his foolishness. According to Ulrich's own account, she sent a message saying his antics were undignified and unworthy of a true knight. This rejection devastated him more than any battlefield wound ever could. Yet Ulrich never gave up on the ideals of romantic devotion. He married a woman named Perchta around 1222, and they had children together. But his heart remained devoted to the theatrical expression of love. His marriage was typical for nobles of his time, arranged for political and economic reasons rather than romance. Perchta managed his estates efficiently, while he pursued his quests and tournaments. Historical records suggest they maintained a respectful but distant relationship. He wrote his autobiography, The Frauendienst or Service of Ladies, in Middle High German between 1240 and 1255. The manuscript spans over 1,800 stanzas and is one of the most detailed personal accounts we have from a medieval knight. It's written in verse form, following the conventions of courtly romance literature, but includes specific dates, places, and names that have been verified through independent sources. Scholars debate how much of his tale was embellished. Some argue that the entire Venus journey was a literary fiction, a fantasy Ulrich created to entertain readers. However, the weight of evidence suggests otherwise. Multiple independent chronicles from Italian cities mention a German knight dressed as Venus jousting in 1227. Court documents from Vienna reference payments made to Ulrich for tournament expenses around that time. The circumstantial evidence strongly supports that the core events really happened. The Venus journey itself was meticulously planned. Ulrich commissioned special armor that could accommodate his elaborate costumes. He hired artists to create banners depicting Venus rising from the sea, surrounded by cherubs and doves. He commissioned jewelers to craft a golden crown with precious stones, golden bracelets, and a necklace that sparkled in the sunlight. The financial records from his estate show enormous expenditures for this single journey, equivalent to several years of income from his lands, roughly 3,000 marks in medieval currency. To put this in perspective, a skilled craftsman might earn 20 marks per year. Ulrich spent the equivalent of 150 years of a craftsman's wages on his theatrical crusade for love. He sold some of his lands and borrowed money from Italian bankers to finance the expedition. Some financial historians consider it one of the most extravagant personal expenditures of the medieval period. What makes Ulrich's story even more remarkable is that he survived all of this. In an era when jousting regularly killed or maimed participants, he emerged relatively unscathed from hundreds of dangerous encounters. Jousting was incredibly dangerous in the 13th century. Lances were solid wood, armor had weak points, and medical care was primitive. Knights died from infected wounds, internal injuries, and broken necks with alarming frequency. Ulrich's survival through 307 jousts is statistically extraordinary. He did sustain injuries, broken fingers, bruised ribs, a dislocated shoulder, but nothing that permanently disabled him. Some historians speculate that his opponents may have held back slightly, knowing they were participating in a theatrical event rather than deadly combat. Others argue that Ulrich was simply an exceptionally skilled jouster who knew how to take hits and roll with impacts. He lived into his 60s, unusual for a tournament knight, and continued writing poetry and participating in court life until his death around 1275. His later years were spent in relative peace, managing his estates and mentoring younger knights in the arts of poetry and chivalry. He compiled his autobiography and other writings, ensuring his legacy would survive. After his death, his sons inherited his lands and titles, but none of them inherited his theatrical flair. His autobiography was copied and circulated among the German nobility, becoming a popular text in aristocratic circles. By the 14th century, Ulrich von Liechtenstein had become a legendary figure, the epitome of courtly love taken to its logical extreme. He turned his life into a legend, a living poem that challenged everything medieval society believed about masculinity, honor, and devotion. Some historians argue his tales were partially fabricated for literary effect, embellished to make better stories. Others believe every word based on corroborating evidence from chronicles, court records, and financial documents. But one thing is absolutely certain. Ulrich von Liechtenstein was not just a knight, he was the first medieval performer, a pioneer of what we might today call performance art, a man who turned love, pain, and pride into a story that still fascinates the world 8 centuries later. His legacy influenced medieval literature for generations. Other knights began documenting their own adventures, trying to match his theatrical flair. The concept of the knight errant, wandering in search of adventure and love, owes much to Ulrich's real-life example. Writers like Wolfram von Eschenbach and Gottfried von Strassburg, who were composing their great romances around the same time, may have been influenced by news of Ulrich's exploits. The Frauendienst became required reading for any noble who wanted to understand courtly love. It was studied, debated, and imitated throughout the German-speaking world. Even today, medieval literature scholars consider it an essential primary source for understanding the culture, values, and daily life of 13th century European nobility. Modern readers might find Ulrich's obsessive devotion disturbing or even pathological. His willingness to mutilate himself, humiliate himself, and bankrupt himself for unrequited love seems extreme by any standard. But in the context of medieval courtly love literature, he was the ultimate practitioner, the man who lived the ideals that others only wrote about. If you love true stories that sound too wild to be real, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell, because history is overflowing with legends like this waiting to be rediscovered. Drop a comment below telling us what medieval story you want to hear next, and share this video with anyone who thinks history is boring. Trust me, they have no idea what they're missing. Hit that like button if Ulrich's story amazed you, and let us know in the comments whether you think his devotion was romantic or just insane. We read every comment, and your suggestions shape our future videos.